Now, I have very much been looking forward to the next conversation. If I could have Laurence and Amri on the stage, please. You can actually have a seat here.
Where shall we sit?
You can sit here, and Amri can sit here.
Thank you.
I sit next to the boss or on this side?
You sit where you feel most comfortable. So, Laurence, you bring a wealth of experience and knowledge in your role as professor of management at the Stockholm School of Economics, where you focus on management and organization, and in particular in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
And Amri, you are the author of Reconstructing Inclusion, and also the founder of Inclusion Wins. You also have an extensive experience from years working, for example, with Cookros and Novartis. So this would be very interesting to hear now. I would like to start off with a question to you, Amri. In this global, fast-paced business environment community, where efficiency is a key, what role does D&I play?
Well, first, Madeline and to Mitliv, thank you for allowing me to be here from Basel, Switzerland. My accent doesn't give it away, but that's where I actually live. You know, the way we define diversity at Inclusion Wins is any mixture of similar and different attributes and their respective tensions and complexities. Therefore, we know that particularly when an organization is going through some type of major change, similar to what Jim said about Volvo, there's a little bit of tension and there's a lot of complexity. How do we actually bring that tension and complexity into a space where we can adapt to situations in a way that allows us to create the future that we're working to create? So I think when I think about the pace of business, when you think about and practice diversity, equity, and inclusion in a way that's accessible to everyone, understanding that everybody is inside of this paradigm and there's nobody, whether they're in a predominantly in-group or predominantly a group in power, everybody's involved in the paradigm. Second, that this is unambiguously prioritized in the organization. DEI is prioritized like anything else in the organization, but it's not prioritized by itself. It's prioritized inside everything we do, how we think, mindsets, skill sets, et cetera. And then lastly, it's built for sustainability, or it's purpose-oriented, meaning that it's aligned with your organizational values. Hopefully it's aligned with people's individual purpose, but definitely aligned with the business purpose. So when we're talking about fast pace, understanding the tension and being able to have the skill set to work through it. Second, being able to prioritize the skills that you need to adapt and create the future. And then, of course, all of this needs to be firmly aligned with who you are in organizational purpose for it to be sustained.
Thank you. So do you see anything in this area, Laurence?
Well, thanks for inviting me. I also wanted to thank you. I mean, I like your question about efficiency and this word, you know, focus on efficiency. If we think back of the diversity, inclusion, and the movement back in the US on social justice, the idea of justice, fairness was very strong. And now today we may think, well, diversity and inclusion is a lot about efficiency, you know, and performance. Yes, it's a lot about it, but I would say it's also bringing back or keeping this idea, the main idea of justice and equality. But it does it differently. So let me give an example. Imagine you're a consulting company and you have a client who's maybe unfamiliar or uncomfortable with a person with a migration background. What would be most efficient to do right now is to send someone who's, you know, like your client. And there you win, you know, your client and the market. But if we, diversity and inclusion, ask us to think about efficiency differently and ask us to have a broader picture, you know, to consider multiple stakeholders. And there you will most likely consider, okay, what is the best person to send for my pool of talents? And then you will be with your client, accompanying your client to learn on dealing with, you know, differences. And then you will also contribute to society in general with more equality. So efficiency is still there. is there in diversity management, but I think justice and equality is back on the agenda, or is still on the agenda, and forces us to have multiple stakeholders.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll throw in a question. And I have this quote that I really love. It's called, "Don't be afraid to give up the good to go for the great." And now, when I think it wasn't me, it was Rockefeller so who said it. And I think he had an idea of what he was talking about. But either way, I think like when we talk about efficiency, are we talking about good? Are we talking about great? How can we incorporate people from a diverse pool to be part of that? Are we stuck are we complacent? Or what is the hurdle that we have to face?
Yeah, I think sometimes we think efficiency is always about speed. It's about how can we get there as quickly as we can. And there's a Zen saying that says you have to slow down to speed up. And sometimes in the diversity conversation, if you slow down just enough, I'm not saying slow down to a crawl, but slow down just enough to see something in a way that you weren't able to see it before, you might actually be surprised and create something much more extraordinary than moving along around the preferences, traditions, and conveniences that you've always worked under. And so I'd say when you think about hurdles, I think one of the biggest hurdles is that people don't necessarily understand what DEI is. I think the fundamental space is that, are we creating the conditions for people to thrive and for the organization to create more value than just for itself? And so inside, I'm going back to you, Jim, because you're the best person I know, probably best in the room, and you're really good. But, you know, if you think about this as, in a way, fulfilling on your purpose, you're not going to be like, oh, DEI is too difficult. Oh, we're not going to be able to get the best people. All those types of things will come up. But when it's aligned with purpose and you understand that you just need to slow down slightly enough and understand that DEI isn't a zero-sum game, isn't a check-the-box exercise, isn't just about representation, full stop, you start seeing what the potential is to create the conditions for a future of your organization that otherwise wouldn't be possible unless you made it a clear priority.
Thank you. Moving on, I think this is really interesting, and we're going to continue with this on the line of this. But I would like to take the global perspective more. So where you are at this moment, what do you see as the current areas of opportunities where companies can make the most change in a win-win manner from where you're standing? Mm-hmm. Would you like to start?
Yes. Okay, so my perspective is Sweden. Sweden in a society which is changing, and how we thought about Sweden, our society has now is shifting to a different idea. Okay, so we used to be we used to think of ourselves as a multicultural society, and now this is challenged. So from this perspective, if you ask me what could be done to make a win-win-win situation, I would say, if we want to talk and address inequality, this is a huge issue. This is a problem that no one can solve. This is one of the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Not one single actor will be able to solve that. So my idea is that form alliances. And what kind of alliances? Well, you're a private organization. You want to do good. There is a lot of goodwill. There is a lot of potential for action. There is a lot of value and drive for making a change. But you cannot make a change on your own as an organization. So partner with other actors in society. And I would say this is an alliance of three actors. Private organization where there is a lot of power for action and a lot of will and a lot of ideas. But partner with, for example, public organizations. It's not common that we do that, but employment office or social services or university, they're all public organizations. There is a lot of knowledge about those issues or the wicked problem, and they have a mission. And then the third actor, that I think which is also underestimated, is a civil society organization. Civil society organizations are super powerful. It's not a coincidence that dictatorship want to kill civil society organizations, because they have the capacity and the power to mobilize people and to make them believe in an alternative, because they have a vision. So if you bring together power for action together with public organizations that have a mission, together with civil society organizations that have a vision, I think you're into something. And that, in today's Sweden, from my perspective, I think this can be a huge recipe for success.
So on that topic, so we are often criticized for working in silos, and that is what you're saying, to break down the silos.
Exactly.
So my question is, because there are some forms of partnerships, but how would do you have an idea of successful partnering that could really make a difference? Because I think that is also a difficulty today, that even if you find a partnership, the whole partnership idea is quite novel. So how can we make effective partnerships?
I think if you partner with someone that is at the same, how shall I put it? If you're a small organization, maybe you're not going to, I don't know, you partner with maybe another small organization, but multiply the areas in which you have your partner. So quite often we're an organization and we partner with a civil society organization, and that stays a small scale thing. Add another partner, add another perspective, partner with public. Public organizations, I would say, are very often forgotten about, and they have the power to make change. So how to make that? Multiply your partner. Don't be, it's not enough. Of course, it's already great, but consider that sponsoring a civil society organization is great, but make it a partnership, work together, have projects, and bring in a third partner, a third actor in society, and then you're scaling up significantly. Yeah.
Thank you. Amri, just before you start, in relation to an inclusive labor market, how would you take on this equation?
Yeah, I'm going to come back to Laurence's answer and the answer about partnerships. When I was still inside, I was the head of cultural intelligence and inclusion at Novartis. We built a mentoring program, but it was over the course of a year and a half. It was really almost like an apprenticeship. So we brought students in from universities that probably wouldn't be considered the best of the best. You all ever heard that before? And we brought them in from these schools. They had all of the aptitude, but they had very little exposure. So a lot of the times that we're thinking about talent, we're thinking about talent based on the exposure that we're familiar with. These students didn't have that familiarity with exposure to high-level pharma companies, to the top science at MIT, Harvard, et cetera, because I was in Boston at the time. What we did is we brought them into our labs to work with our scientists. And the result was almost all of them went to get an MD, PhD, or a MD, or a PhD by itself at a top-tier school. Why did that happen? One, they were wicked smart. That's a Boston word, by the way. Two, they had the kind of mentoring and coaching that was really an exchange, because the mentors, as you all in the audience, I know many of you are mentors, you get way more as a mentor than you get as a mentee, wink. Those mentors got a lot from interacting with those students who they otherwise would have never engaged on a day-to-day basis with somebody from those backgrounds. At least very few of them would. That result didn't just create their science to grow, because we also partnered with MIT and Harvard. So they grew their science academically, but they also built their networks. And so the networks of those students were things that they could carry with them to graduate school and things that they could carry with them after graduate school. We didn't have any skin in the game saying, you must come back and work for us. Our skin in the game was go out and do something great and then talk about us a little bit. And then potentially come back. And some of them have subsequent to my leaving Novartis. And so when you start talking about an inclusive labor market, it's oftentimes about the informal networks that give people the opportunities that they just wouldn't see if their networks weren't formed. So engage with people that you normally wouldn't engage with. That can be institutions and organizations, and be deliberate about continuing those relationships, building them, and then taking a little bit of what you might consider a risk on people that are outside of the networks that you frequent most. Bring people into the networks that you frequent most. And we know that innovation doesn't happen just because you have smart people. It often comes because you have some tension, you have some challenge, you have somebody that's going to ask a question that's outside of what you're accustomed to. If you create the care, the openness, the safety, and the trust for people to do that, particularly when they're outside of the so-called in-group, the opportunities to create the extraordinary are unlimited.
Thank you. So, time is running so fast. This is not what I had in my plan. No, I'm just joking. But the question I would like to really ask is, so what defines a successful outcome of D&I? What is the prize that we're actually chasing? What do you say, Laurence?
Okay. I leave to you to answer to all the practical, aspects of what are the prize at the level of an organization. I tend to think of inclusion in broader ways. So let me take a metaphor. I tend to think of inclusion in terms of a negotiation. Imagine inclusion is a game. So people have been playing the game of inclusion, like what is it to be in our organization? What kind of organizational culture do we have? What is our society? They have developed this idea of there are rules, there are things you do, things you don't do. Those who are coming from outside the society, outside the labor market, outside the organization, if they want to come in, they have to play by the rules of the game. So this is how I'm thinking about inclusion. It's actually a game and there are rules. But the rules have been set by those who are already included and those who are in a power position. So I think of inclusion as an element of always power. There are power struggles in inclusion. It's a game, it has its rule. What are we after? To me, it's changing the rules of the game slightly. It's about entering in a negotiation with those who are already playing the game and allowing those who are outside to influence us in changing how we do things. And that would be negotiating in an organization, what will be the language we're going to speak, what would be the university we recruit from. It's going to be so many different aspects, and there are hundreds of details to deal with. But the idea that we have to change, we are learning by including more people, and we do that not by letting them become like us, but by allowing us to change. So if you ask me, what is the big prize we're after change, we're after being dynamic, we are after constantly learning to adapt and stay, up to.
Love that,
yeah.
Love that. What do you say, Amri?
Peter Senge said that leadership is the capacity for a human community to create its future, to create a future that allows for you to adapt to whatever comes at you. So for me, that's one outcome, the ability to really build leadership that builds cultures that are fit for the future. So that's one. Two, I think there's an opportunity, and this is how we define inclusion, is actions that create the conditions for everyone to thrive and to create a generative organization. Thriving means people are happy. Thriving means people are learning. Thriving means people build the skills and the networks so that they can solve complex challenges. Thriving means that they're challenged and they feel like they're growing. That's what thriving means. And there's all types of other definitions that one could throw in there, but thriving is one of those words that I think is an outcome that should always be part of our work. The second one is this notion of a generative organization. Those of you that are gardeners or have a backyard know that things grow when they're given the right conditions. And so when we create those conditions, things can grow in a way that also creates that future that we all say that we really would like to create. And so that generative notion is an organization that's generative creates more value than just for itself. It creates value for community, it creates value for its people, it creates value for society. So my answer almost always when somebody says an outcome is thriving, and that's people, and generative, and that's everybody. And I think the way we get there faster, if you want to talk efficiency, is you bring people from the margins into the center where the people that have power have generally hung out together alone. So you want to go further? I think I heard earlier, go together. So bring people in from the margins, do so in a way that creates a dialogue, not of a power differential or dynamic, but of one that is about our humanity and centers on that rather than all these things that get in the way of us being as human as possible.
Fantastic. Laurence and Amri, a huge applause. Thank you for having shared your ideas with us. Thank you so much.